Allie Kay. Welcome to my dog painting demo for today. If you are new here and you don't know, I do live demos every Monday at 5 Eastern time. And we paint different things. Sometimes it is portraits of people, sometimes pets, sometimes flowers, and you never know what we might do next. So I'm glad that you're here with me. If you are joining me, feel free to jump in and say hi, introduce yourself, and you are more than welcome to ask questions as I move through this piece. So I am going to get started. Today I'm going to be painting Archie, my client's dog, and I got my underpainting on here. And I'm going to move the camera in a little bit so that you can see more clearly as I work. But I started this piece by transferring my outlines onto my panel. And I have a very sophisticated technique of doing that. It's called printing out a picture of the image and tracing over it with transfer paper. So that is how I get my outlines on here. And then what I did is I painted over the outlines with a pale purple. And then I just did a very thin wash just to kind of build up some shading there. So that's like my basic roadmap that I'm going to use to create this painting. So now that I have my roadmap on here, I am going to put an underpainting on. And the underpainting is a base coat of color that you put down before you start the painting. And I like to work with a complementary color underpainting, but I have a little bit of fun with it too. I don't always, complementary means the opposite on the color wheel, but I don't always go with the true opposite. So for the dog here, I'm seeing a lot of kind of brown and warm yellowy brown tones. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do purple for the whole dog. I'm going to do a wash of permanent dark violet, which is the color that I like to put under skin tones too. If you've seen some of my demos where I paint portraits of people, that is my go-to color for under skin tones, and it's pretty much the same for animals. So I'm going to do a real thin wash of that and let you see how that goes on, and then we'll go from there. So I love this permanent dark violet. It's such a fun, vivid, intense color. Now, I'm not going to worry at all about my outlines. I am thinking about the areas where it's going to be a little bit darker, so the face is a little bit darker than some of the body down here that's catching a highlight. So in those places where I know it's going to be a little bit lighter, I'm going to thin out my wash and put my purple in a little bit lighter in those places, because that helps to start creating more of the illusion of the shading that we want to put in there. So I'm thinking about that as I'm doing my wash. And I'm using a big square brush. That's the shape that I like, but really with brushes, that's kind of a personal preference thing. And this is a wood artist panel that I got from Jerry's Artorama. This is 11 by 14, so this one's a little bit bigger than what I've done in some of my other demos. I had been doing like 8 by 8 and 8 by 10 in some of the other demos, simply because that was what I had on hand, and a lot of these are commission pieces, so my clients had ordered smaller pieces, but this one's just a little bit larger. So I'm just putting that wash in everywhere that I see that the dog's gonna be. And now that I've got that in very loosely, in some places I might go back and darken the purple a little bit after this starts to set up, but it's still pretty wet, so I don't wanna go into it too much. But now I'm going to decide what color underpainting I want to do for my background. And I gave a little indication of the floor and I think this might be a kitchen cabinet up here in my underpainting. I haven't fully decided if I actually want to include that, but I threw it in there when I did my outlines, and I'll kind of decide as I go. But the floor is brown and it's showing up with a lot of oranges. I put a filter on this photo to bring out the color a little bit more. And so my opposite of orange, I'm going to use blue for that. So I'm going to use phthalo blue green shade, which is a very intense color as well. So I'm thinning that out quite a bit. And I'm just gonna put a wash of that down. Ooh, I had a little too much on my brush. That's gonna really run. I need to offload my brush a little bit so it's not so soupy. The thing about these panels, these are some new panels I started working on. They're super slick, which usually I like, but they're so slick that the paint's like running down them. So when the paint's really watery, kind of falls off a little bit. I actually did go in, they came pre-gessoed, but I went in and added another layer of my own gesso on top of that. I kind of wish maybe I had done another one, because it's maybe a little too smooth for me. So I'm kind of liking where in some places this blue is going over the purple and making a new kind of in-between color there. So you can see I'm letting that blue carry right into the dog. I'm not being worried about making that underpainting edge a real clean edge, because in fact it's better to start with loose edges. That way we won't get too carried away trying to make our edges perfectly clean. So that's how you kind of get the painting started from the very beginning with loose edges, and then you can tighten up in some places that you choose to, but I usually save that for towards the end. Now we got some drips, that's okay. All right, so now we've got the underpainting. So in general, this is a very warm photo, and so that's why I chose cool colors for my underpainting. If the photo that I was painting was a lot of cool colors, then I would start with a lot of warm colors for the underpainting. So you can kind of tweak that, and you can have a little bit of freedom too. Like I said, you don't have to do like the exact opposite. There's no rules with this. It's just I like to do warm versus cool. Okay, I mentioned before that I might want to go in and darken a little bit of my purple. Now that this is set up enough, I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to add another layer in the areas where I feel like the dog is, or the final layers will be darker. So I want to build those up a little bit darker. So I'm seeing some shadow here. Got to get a little more paint, a little less water on my brush. All right. So we've got some shadow on the legs. And having this underpainting be a little bit true to the tone as far as light and dark will help me when I start adding the actual colors, because I won't be fighting against it so much if I'm already starting with a darker base in the places where I want to put the darker colors. And I'm leaving my base lighter in the places where I want the lighter colors. Like up at the top, it's going to be really bright. So I don't want to make that purple any darker than what I've done already. All right, and definitely ask some questions if there's anything that you're wondering about. I'm definitely checking back all the time in the comments, so I'm happy to answer your questions. I know a lot of you watch my demos every week, so I've probably covered so much that you're like experts already. But I know we also have some new people all the time too. So, all right. Okay, that is enough of the underpainting. So now I'm going to start bringing out some of the true colors. So I'm going to start mixing some of the fur or hair, some of that color. So I'm going to start with the warmer tones up at the top. So this is going to be kind of like a sandy color. And so I'm going to make that using a smaller brush. Let me find a good one. All right, so now I'm switching down to a number 3 brush, and I'm going to make that new sand color using white and some burnt umber light and a little bit of Hansa yellow opaque, and I'm going to warm it up a little bit with some pyrrole red light. Now, if you have watched my people portraits, you might notice that these are actually the same 4 colors that I use for skin tones. So even though this does not look anything like any skin tones, you can still make a variety of different neutrals using those same 4 colors. So, okay, so I got some of that on there, and I'm going to thin my paint with a little bit of glaze. So now after I've done the underpainting, I'm not thinning with water anymore. I'm going to thin with glaze, and that will help the paint to not fall down the canvas so much, and it'll allow some of that underpainting to show through. So I'm just kind of looking for like the lightest 50% or so, and I am going to get considerably lighter. This is not my very lightest, so I will be building up these tones even more, but I'm just kind of taking baby steps at this point. Oh, and some of my underpainting was still wet there. I want to avoid that. You want your underpainting to be dry before you start building layers on top of it, and that is because if it's wet, you're going to tint the later layers, and you don't want to do that because then that's going to dilute your color and it's not going to be as vivid. So you see how I'm just like laying a brush stroke down and leaving it. I'm not scrubbing them in and I'm not blending. I'm really just setting these brush strokes down, setting them down and leaving them alone. And I'm looking very closely at my reference image and just finding those areas of highlight. And it's pretty easy because I already have them all mapped out from the underpainting. So that makes it very easy to just know exactly where I need to put this so that I can go pretty quick. And if you are like probably thinking to yourself, yeah, that is easy for you and it's not easy for me. I understand where you're going with that. And it is practice. I mean, I've done this so many times, but that's probably my biggest piece of advice is to practice. And force yourself to do a painting where you are not blending and you're just setting those colors down. And don't be afraid of showing the brush strokes. All right. So usually layering light over dark works well. I don't really know why. It's just the way I like to do it. And I feel like it's pretty successful doing it that way when you build up a slightly darker base and then you layer some lighter tones on top of it. I guess it's because of the way that light falls, you know, light falls on top of the shadows. So you wouldn't want the shadows to be added on top of the highlights, if that makes sense. And as I'm coming down, I do see that my highlights should be getting a little bit cooler, but I'm just gonna keep going with this color just for the sake of adding some highlights in, and then I'll add some cooler ones after that. This is gonna be a fun painting. It's such a cute photo. I always get really excited when my clients send me their reference image and I get to play around with it and do some editing to it, and then I can show them a pretty good idea of how their painting is going to look before I even start it. So that's fun for them too, that they can see that ahead of time. All right. And when you're painting hair and fur, you're not painting individual strands of it. You're really looking for the large clumps. And that's what we're adding in. All right, I think I need to switch to a cooler tone. So to make this a little bit cooler, what I'm going to do is add a little more white to it, and I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Gray, which I thought I had out, but I don't. Payne's Gray is really not gray. It's actually a really nice navy blue that I use quite a bit. So I'm going to add some of that to my original recipe, which will cool it down. And we'll start putting in some slightly cooler tones. And you'll be able to see the difference here in this neutral. It's going to show up a little bit more gray. So I like using kind of grays and blues in our cool shadows. In general, shadows tend to be a cooler color. I also like to use a lot of purple in my shadows because I think it's fun. I just like to sprinkle purple really wherever I can. Let's be honest, I'm putting it everywhere. But hey, I think it works. So that's the fun thing about color, and that's what I really love about painting is I don't try to make my paintings look exactly like a photo because I feel like you have a photo. So I want the painting to look like something kind of new and different and unique, but I still want it to be representational of the subject that I'm painting. I want the person who's ordering a commission to immediately know that that is their family member or animal, or really animals are family members. So if you get your highlights and your shadows in the correct places, even if some of the colors get a little wild, it still looks very much like the subject. All right, I need to make my shadows a little bit darker now. So I'm gonna add a little bit more of that Payne's Gray, and I'm gonna dip a little bit of purple in there too, like I had mentioned, because I like having some more purple in my shadows. I'm gonna put a little bit more glaze in there to thin it out a pinch more, and I'm seeing some more purple tones over here. Sometimes it's distracting when you have so much underpainting showing because everything looks purple, but I'm just trying to go off of what I see in the reference image. And that's why I like to kind of bounce all over the panel and get a little bit of color everywhere, because when you start with these really wild underpainting colors, I know that that can be a little bit distracting in the beginning until you get a little bit more of that covered up. So I like to kind of jump around and work on covering that up as I go. And pretty soon I'm going to jump in and do those eyes because he has the most adorable little eyes and I can't wait to paint them. And plus the eyes are always kind of like a wow moment when you get the eyes in, either with an animal or a person. It just always feels like it comes together so much once you get the eyes in there. So we need to do that. All right, I'm kind of like leaning back away from my piece every so often just to like get a better perspective of it. Sometimes when you're right on top of it, it becomes hard to really see what it is that you're doing. I'm going to darken my cool shade a little bit. I added a little bit more Payne's Gray and a little bit more burnt umber just to make it a little deeper, and I'm going to put some of that fur in there too that I'm seeing that's a little bit darker. A little more burnt umber, a little more Payne's Gray to darken it even further. I see more of these dark tones around the eyes. I do want to actually paint the actual eyes, but I feel like I need to get a little bit more of the fur around them done first. It's fun how fur and hair can just have so many colors going on in it. It's really a neat thing. Everyone's so quiet today. I see there's a lot of you out there watching, but nobody's saying anything. Do you guys have anything you want to talk about? All right. I get a lot of people asking if my portrait demos will be available after, if they're going to miss a demo, and the answer to that is yes. All of the portrait painting, well, all the painting demos are available on my page as replays after. So if you ever miss one and you really want to catch it, you can do that on the page. All right, now let's go in and paint those fun eyes. So I'm going to mix up a dark black, and I will do that using my Payne's Gray and some alizarin crimson. So those two colors actually make a really dark purple. But if you've watched me paint before, you know that I never use black. I always mix my blacks, and it's usually a very dark purple. You want to make sure that you don't have any white on your brush, because it will contaminate it and it'll lighten your black up. And I think I have just a pinch, but I'm going to work with it. Okay, so now I'm just looking for the very darkest areas. I might need to switch to a smaller brush, but we'll see if I can make this work. And I kind of already mapped these out in my underpainting, but I'm going to push them even a little bit darker still. So you want to look at your reference image really closely and make sure that the areas that look totally black in your image, that you're actually painting totally black. Sometimes we let our brains take over a little bit too much, and we start to think that things aren't the way that we see them in the photo. But we really just have to go off of exactly what we see, because that is our map. And it might not always make sense, but it's like it'll come together if you just let it happen. Got some dark tones underneath. Okay, let's get that other eye in. See, I told you I was going to paint the eyes, and then I started jumping all over the place, and I didn't even think about it, but that is pretty much how I paint. I'm always kind of jumping around when I've got a color on my brush. I'm always just kind of thinking like, okay, where else can I put this? And I think it helps to unify the painting, but it also helps me to just paint quicker, because I'm not constantly remixing colors. If I've got a color, I just drop it in everywhere that I need to drop it in. Got a little bit of the collar here. Make those eyes nice and dark. Okay. Now I need to bring in some kind of like bluish gray that I'm going to use for my reflections. And I'm going to switch down to a smaller brush so that I can get a little bit more accurate there when I'm doing those reflections, because I really want those to be spot on. So I'm going to make this new dark gray color using Payne's Gray again and white, but now I'm going to add a little bit of phthalo blue, which is that intense blue. So that's gonna really be strong, and maybe it's a little too strong, so I'm going to tone it down by adding a little bit of the alizarin crimson, but it'll be a little bit more of a vivid color than a gray color. All right, so I'll start dropping those reflections in there. And I really want to leave some little bits of my purple showing because I think that's going to be really cool. And the highlights are not super, super bright. I don't want to overdo it. I'm going to drop some of this blue in around the eyes too, because I'm just seeing that color kind of bouncing around. And why don't we put some on the nose too? Because it's already on my brush. Some under there. Okay, so now I need to make that blue a notch brighter. So I'm gonna put a little more white in there. Make it a little bit more vivid with a little more of that phthalo blue. And I'm gonna give a couple dashes of this more intense blue. And once you get these reflections in, that's like really when it starts to sing and come alive. It's amazing how like just a couple little dashes can do so much, but it really can. And this isn't even as bright as I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go a little bit brighter too. I really like painting reflective things like eyes. Because it's like, if you get the reflections right, it's just, it can be really good. Okay. Now we have some cooler reflections under the eyeballs that are a little more muted. Over here it's kind of purple. So I'm going to add a little purple to my mixture there and darken it a little. And drop that tone in. I need to bring my black. I need to correct my black a little bit. I got a little bit off there. And sometimes you have to do that. I can tell that the shape of these black, solid black areas is not quite right. So I'll just fix it. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to that straight black and fix that real quick. So I did that with Payne's Gray and Alizarin Crimson. I picked a new spot on my palette so that it's not contaminated. I'm just gonna fix up this black shape because I can see it comes down like that and I had it not quite right. And while I'm at it, I'll just look at my other one too and make sure those black areas are in the right places. It could use a little correcting there. Okay. And now I think I can go in and brighten up those blue highlights a little bit because that first layer has had a second to set up. So I'm going to add a little more white to that bright blue that was with the phthalo blue and white. And I'm going to use that almost straight. Actually, I'm going to go to a new spot in my palette because then I can make sure I don't have it too contaminated because I want this to be super intense. And we'll just add a little flash of that. There, that's helping. Okay, so his eyes are starting to glow a little bit. Okay. Now, I think I want to put some color in the background just to cover up some of that blue so it's not distracting me so much. I want to darken it too because I can see that I don't want the background to be lighter than what he is because you see how bright these areas are, so the background behind him needs to be quite a bit darker. And I'm going to use my big brush. I'm just going to lay that background in pretty quickly. Well, maybe that's too big. We'll go a little smaller. I'm going to use a number 7 brush. That's what that looks like. Okay, so I am going to make this kind of like an orangey brown. I think that'll look good. So I'm going to make my orangey brown using yellow and some alizarin crimson. Those two colors together make a really cool like burnt orange. And I'm going to add some glaze to it to thin that out a little bit. I think I need some more glaze. I'm running out of glaze, you can hear that. Okay, so I'm gonna drop this color in here, and because it's a wood floor going this way, I'm going to drop my brush strokes in that way. And you can see that this color is actually showing up more muted on my palette because it's being layered over the bright blue. But that's okay. I knew that was going to happen. So I might even add a little bit more of the alizarin crimson to offset that because I don't really want it to be green. I want it to show up as more of a blue. It's funny when you layer colors on top of each other how they can react so differently based on the colors that you are pairing it with. Yeah, putting some darker tones in the background here is going to make his body seem brighter and come forward a little bit more, which is what I was going for. But I want to be careful to leave a good amount of that blue because I like it and I put it there for a reason. And I can always cover it more later. So, you know, always think about that. You can always do more later, so less is more in the beginning. Okay. All right. So I still haven't decided what I'm going to do up here. If I'm going to, so I've got this white cabinet up here, and I don't really want to paint it straight white. I think I'm going to come back to that. We'll decide that later. For right now, I'm going to go back to my fur and start pulling out some brighter colors of fur. Actually, no, I'm going to finish this nose because I feel like that's missing right there. We got to get the nose in. So let's make a black using Payne's Gray and alizarin crimson. And I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in there now because I feel like I see a little bit of more green tone in the nose. And I'm going to add a little bit of white to lighten that up. All right, a little more Payne's Gray. Okay, I think I got a good neutral here to put on the nose. Just had to build some color up there before I went into the fur anymore because he would look weird if he didn't have a nose. It's funny, sometimes when you are working on your own painting, you're so much on top of it that sometimes something that it needs really bad doesn't stand out to you because you're just like so wrapped up in each brush stroke. And I see that a lot, like when I teach live classes. Sometimes, you know, from across the room, I'll be able to tell right away what needs to be adjusted, but sometimes it's hard for students when they're right on top of it to figure that out because you just get wrapped up in each stroke. So I'm just bringing some of these darker, kind of greenish tones in a few more places. I like this color. Add a little more glaze to it to make it stretch. Okay, now we will go in and start pulling out some more of those brighter highlights that I talked about before. Okay, gotta clean my brush off, get rid of all that dark dingy color. And my new neutral, remember we had kind of like a sand tone. I was using white, burnt umber light, Hansa yellow opaque, and some pyrrole red light. So I'm going back to those same 4 colors that I use for skin tones, but now I'm going to use more white just to brighten it up. And I'm going to keep it a little more opaque too, which will make it stand out. I might need even more white. I go through a lot of white paint. So thanks again to everybody for watching my demo today. And make sure you put on your calendar next Monday. I'll do it every Monday, live at 5 Eastern. There, that's a nice bright color. And please share this with anybody else that you know who might like to have a free little painting demo and learn a few tricks along the way. Yeah, pulling out these much brighter tones is really going to start to make it have some pop to it. And as I'm going, I'm kind of like squinting at my piece, and that helps to just tell me like the differences between my piece and the reference image. Something about that, when you just kind of blur the forms a little bit, it just helps to tell you what you need to do. It's interesting how it works out. It's kind of the same thing as like stepping away from your piece and like looking at it from across the room. Sometimes you just have to do that to really figure out what's going on and figure out what it is that it needs. Haven't really done too much with the paws down here. Now this side is definitely cooler, so I shouldn't really use too much of my warm sand color over here because I want to save that for those cool tones. So probably should just go ahead and mix up my cool tone. Okay, so now I'm going to back to that cool neutral. So I'll use some white, some burnt umber, and some Payne's Gray again. Probably have a little too much burnt umber in there. It should have been more white and Payne's Gray. I'm just going to go to a new spot on my palette. So this is mostly white and Payne's Gray now that I'm going to use for my cool highlights over here. A little more white. Okay, so now I'm gonna try pulling out a few of these cool highlights. There we go. Probably need to go a little brighter, but we'll start with this. Always kind of take baby steps. That's why I don't have to do any blending, because it's kind of like you're creating a gradient and you're just taking these little baby steps in the direction that you want to go, and then you don't really have to do any blending because your eye does the blending. I should probably check our time. Okay, oh, we're doing really well. We have like 20 minutes left. Awesome. Usually I'm frantic till the end, but I'm not going to finish this piece today, but I like to just get a really good amount of it done so you can see where I'm going with it. I guess it's because people haven't been asking questions today. So up in the front, I do see like some individual strands, but I'm still not really painting them in that way. I'm just kind of twisting my brush on the side and painting in some smaller clumps, but I'm still not putting in individual strands. Okay, now I'm gonna put some even brighter tones, especially on this side, because this is where I see it almost glowing. And it's kind of a warm glow. So I'm going to use just about straight white. Maybe just tint it the tiniest bit. And I think maybe I'll tint it with a little bit of red. Make like almost like a pink. I think that will be kind of interesting. I don't really see it as pink, but I kind of want to just do that. So let's try that. Yeah. We have a purple underpainting. We might as well have pink highlights. Got a chunk of paint there. Oh, I just got a notification from my friend Terry saying that apparently you guys are asking me questions and I'm not getting any notifications. So I'm so sorry that I am not seeing it. Hold on. Let's see. For some reason, I'm not seeing comments. Let's see. Oh, man. Come on, Facebook. All right. Sorry if you guys are asking me questions and I'm not answering you. I'm not seeing anything on my end. Thanks a lot, Facebook. We'll try to sort that out. I'm like getting a notification seeing that you're watching, just not any questions. Oh, every time there's some sort of technical difficulty. The growing pains of Facebook Live. I feel like everybody's doing it right now. So they're trying to figure out what they're doing. All right. So yeah, we got some of those brighter tones. It gets even brighter up here. I think I'm gonna go in with straight white up there. I'm just checking one more time to figure out why I can't see it. I have an idea. I think I know why I'm not seeing the notifications. I think, so you know I have a Facebook business page and a personal page, and you can like flip back and forth between how you use Facebook. I bet that somehow it's like got me using it as my personal, and that's why I'm not seeing my own notifications. I'm guessing that's what happened. But at least you still get to watch it live. All right. I think maybe I'll use some of the same kind of pinky white that I was using up at the top where it was white behind him. And maybe I'll add a little yellow in there, kind of make it like a bright orange and add a bunch of white to it. I think that'll look good. So I'll put that over my blue in the background. Still leaving some underpainting showing. Oh, and over here it gets darker, but I don't know if I want to do that dark. Yeah, I will. Okay, so this is kind of like a dark purpley color. So we'll just put that in with some permanent dark violet, a little bit of brown. That's a little too warm though. I need a little Payne's gray on there. Cool it down, make kind of a nice dark purple. There. And when I put this dark color behind him, that's gonna make him come forward. All right. Now the piece is looking still pretty cool, so I want to add some pops of some brighter tones. So in my reference image, I've got like some bright oranges and reds, and I want to bring some of that in. So I'm going to make like a really bright orangey red using pyrrole red and some Hansa yellow, and a little bit of white. I need a clean spot on my palette. Do I have one? I think so. I really like pyrrole red light with white. It makes this really fun, like coral color. Yeah, that's gonna look so fun with the cool colors underneath. And I see a little bit of this like on his chin, kind of, in the hair. And some of this is just kind of like confetti in the background. I'm just dropping it in there because I want to. I'm gonna add a little more yellow in it, make it a little bit more orange. And thin it out a little bit with a little bit of glaze. All right, now in the background, my floor gets like a little bit more muted, so the color is not quite as intense. So I'm just adding a little bit more glaze to it to kind of thin out my color. If I have any more glaze, running low on glaze. All right. And I added a little bit of white to it too, just to mute it a little bit. All right. Check on our time again. Okay. I want to bring in some more like bright blue cool highlights. So I'm going to use some of that phthalo blue, that intense blue, and I'm just going to go into this little puddle of gray that I already had going, and some white. And I'm just going to continue with some of those blue pops. That maybe is a little too muddy. I'm going to make that a little more vibrant by adding more white and a little more phthalo blue. And this kind of ties in with my blue that I put down in my underpainting. So I like to kind of like marry my underpainting with some of the later colors that I'm going to put down. It just kind of like ties it all together and makes it make sense. A little of that there. So if anyone is interested in commissioning a pet portrait, I do have these available to order right on my website. And pet portraits are actually the same pricing scale as human portraits. So if you're interested, you just go right to my website under portraits, and if you scroll down, you can see what you need to do to order a portrait, and you just pick your size and make your deposit, and then we go from there, and you can select an image to send to me. You don't have to have your image selected before placing your order. I am happy to help you with what would make a good photo to use. So there's certain criteria that I usually look for that makes a good photo. So I'm always happy to share that with you too. But I think these make great Christmas presents, you know, to give somebody a special portrait of somebody they love is pretty much a win-win for a Christmas present. So just putting that out there, guys. Start thinking about Christmas early. Plus my schedule fills up really fast with commissions. So I have a handful of openings right now before Christmas. And that is about it. Oh, I wasn't even telling you what I was doing here. Sorry. I made kind of like this darker blue. I used some permanent dark violet and a little bit of that phthalo blue, and then some of my Payne's gray and white. And I'm just putting in some of these darker blue shadows down by the feet. So it's kind of like a periwinkle, not periwinkle, I don't know. Some kind of purple. Periwinkle would be lighter. But I see some of this dark purpley color up by the eyes and the nose. So I'm gonna bring some of that in. Actually, yeah, we're missing some of the highlights on the top of the nose. I did think it was so strange that nobody was talking. Now it makes sense that Facebook was not showing me the things that you guys were saying. Again, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so I need to put some brighter highlights on the nose there. So I'm going to do some burnt umber, some white, and some Payne's gray, I think. Just put a couple little dashes of highlight on there because that nose is wet, so we know that it's catching some light. Actually, probably even brighter. Okay, so I got those highlights in there, but now I notice that the shape of my nose is a little bit off, so I need to clean that up with some of that darker tone. So I'm going to push it darker again with more Payne's gray and burnt umber, or maybe I'll use phthalo blue if I don't have enough Payne's gray. Get some more Payne's gray. Okay, so I need to just kind of clean up that top edge. Sometimes as you like layer in more colors, all of a sudden the shapes of some of your forms get a little bit wonky. So you always have to be continually going back and correcting and just cleaning it up. That looks a little better, I think. All right, we are just about through with today's demo. As I mentioned, I will finish this up. It's not quite done. I will finish this up I'll probably finish it tomorrow. I'm excited to finish this one. and then I'll post the completed picture of it. And then I'll be doing another live demo next Monday. Hopefully next Monday I can see all your lovely comments that you are making while I'm painting, so that we can talk. You can ask me questions. We'll get that sorted out. I promise I will log into my account as my studio and not myself. We'll figure that problem out. There's so many ways to do it wrong. And that way I can chat with you the whole time. But this guy's been fun, even if we couldn't talk about it. All right. Thank you everyone for hanging out with me, even though I was not able to talk to you or answer your questions because of this little technical difficulty. But thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you will join me next time. And if you're new, go back and check out some of my old live demos, because those are all available in the videos tab on my Facebook page. So you can find them all there and watch those too. All right, have a good night, everybody. Take care, and I will see you next Monday.